Hi, it's Penny here, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in the month of November. So I read 13 things, and we have quite a mix this month because I have a few 5 stars, but also some DNFs and some books I really hated. So let's get into talking about the books. I am, as always, going to do this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books and battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. So our first battle is going to be between the first 2 books in the Imperial Radch Trilogy by Leckie up against Not Till We Are Lost by Dennis E. Taylor. So I was very excited to finally get to this series, which I have been anticipating for a long time. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the series title properly because a lot of the words in this are very strangely spelt because there's a lot of like alien influence. So this is a sci-fi series, and our main character is someone who used to be a spaceship. So in this world, we have these AI spaceships, and they also exist through multiple bodies. So the Justice of Torrin, who we're getting the perspective of, used to be a spaceship who had all these bodies that they lived in. And we're getting the story of them kind of participating in this empire that's been colonizing the universe and what's happening in that situation. But also in the future, we now have the Justice of Torrin only now existing in a single body and really wanting to get revenge on what happened to the rest of their bodies. It's a really strange situation, and I really loved the whole society that Leckie has created in these books, but also just this spaceship's perspective of things is so different from the normal human perspective, and I loved it. There are parts where it's a single scene, but our main character is existing in multiple bodies, so you're getting what's happening in different locations explained to you. Like, you can have one line over here and then one line over there, but somehow it's done in a way that isn't confusing. So the first book, Ancillary Justice, is basically the plot I just told you about, and it was super intense, and the way the 2 timelines wove together was amazing, and I love this so much. And after I read this, I really had my doubts whether Ancillary Sword could really live up to that intensity. And I think actually Leckie made a conscious decision not to even try. This book is a lot more slow-paced. You could almost call it cozy, but there are definitely some very non-cozy things happening. So this is dealing with a lot of the fallout of colonization, that we now have these people who believe that they are very civilized, but there's actually a lot of like privilege and class differences going on, a lot of racism going on, and the Justice of Torrin can't help but get involved in these situations. We are still kind of getting the fallout of the bigger empire level things that happened in the first book as well. But still, it's also like a lot of tea drinking and just conversations and politics. Normally I don't necessarily like books that focus a lot on politics because it's a lot of people like fighting for power, and I don't find that a very interesting motivation. But this is more politics in terms of how do we find justice, and a lot of like philosophy, I guess, about what justice even is, that I really enjoyed. So I don't know how many times I need to say I really enjoyed these books, but I really love these, and I can't wait to read the 3rd book. I'm still not sure what direction it's going to go in, but I really love this. I love both of these though in quite different ways, but I think I have to pick one book to put forward through to this battle. So I am going to pick Ancillary Justice, probably just because I read it first. I have to wonder if the first book had been slower like this one, what that would have done for the series. Anyway, if you like sci-fi stories with really weird perspectives on society, then I think you could really like this. I definitely loved it. So, Ancillary Justice will be our entry for this battle. The next book that I read was Not Till We Are Lost by Dennis E. Taylor. So this is the 5th book in the Bobiverse series. So the Bobiverse books are also about an AI spaceship. It follows this man who was a very successful software developer with a plan that when he died he would be frozen. He does die right at the beginning of the series, and when he wakes up he's been put into the brain of this spaceship. He's also able to replicate himself, which he does, and so we end up with a lot of spaceships that are different versions of himself, and we're following a bunch of different versions of himself as they go out and have different adventures across space, dealing with the remnants of humanity after some kind of apocalyptic type event, also new alien species that they're discovering. Especially in the later books, we're now getting different groups of Bobs kind of disagreeing with each other. And once again, like kind of political factions and different, I guess, conflicting goals going on there. So these books are a lot of fun. They're quite humorous in kind of a dad joke kind of way, or maybe just like a uber nerdy kind of way. There's a lot of references to Star Trek and other sci-fi media. In fact, some of it I probably don't even get. So maybe I'm not enough of a sci-fi nerd for this. I also think there is a decent amount of like actual science in these books as the Bobs try to solve different problems with science. And I will admit that some of that just goes over my head, but I still enjoy kind of listening to that problem-solving process, even if I don't understand all of it. I do think the books in this series tend to sneak up on me where I don't necessarily feel like I don't feel blown away like I am with every single thing that's happening in Ancillary Justice. Is that spoiling the book battle? Anyway, I don't feel blown away by it. I'm just like following along with the different characters, engaged but not necessarily loving it until we get to the end, and then I'm so invested in everything that's happening that I'm upset that we're at the end of the book and I have to wait until the next book to find out what's going to happen next because I just want to keep following along with the characters. And I think maybe it's just that the universe that Dennis E. Taylor has created has so much in it to explore and so many ideas to explore that I just don't want to stop exploring once I get into it. Anyway, I already spoiled it, but if I am battling these two books up against each other, then I am going to pick Ancillary Justice as the winner of this battle. So then we have more sci-fi for the next battle. We have The Egg by Andy Weir up against Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. So firstly, The Egg is a very, very short story. It's only a few pages, so I don't want to say too much about what it's about. I will read you the first line though. So the first line just says, "You were on your way home when you died." So the whole thing is written in second person, and I think you could take this as just an exploration of an idea of what might happen. I do think if the idea in this short story is something you've never thought of before, it could be particularly mind-blowing. If you've thought about these kind of ideas before, probably not, but still I think it's written in quite a fun way, so it kind of doesn't matter. And it's such a quick read that you may as well give it a go if you like philosophical afterlife sci-fi. I guess I can't say much more about it, but it was a fun little read. Then we have Gideon the Ninth. So I have it here from the library. And this I feel like is such a strange one to talk about. So we're following this woman named Gideon who has been raised as an orphan on the Ninth House, which is this planet where it's quite like gothic and depressing. Gideon really just wants to leave and they think they've made a plan to do this. It doesn't go that well, but they do manage to make a deal with the head of the house that they will gain their freedom if they will go along with the head of this house, who's this other young woman. They're going to go along with her to this competition and act as security. So we get to this competition and there are basically representatives from all of the 9 houses. 8 houses? Debatable. There's 8 houses competing in the competition, and there is the head of the house as well as the security person from each house. So we've got a lot of characters that you have to keep across. I think it did take me a little while to get to know who those characters were, and I will say a little clue is at the end of the book, one of the characters has gone and done some like research into the characters and written down a little bit of their backstory. I would recommend, if you're reading this, that as you get to the introduction of each character, that you go and read the backstories of those characters, and then you might have a better job of remembering who the characters are. But it kind of also doesn't matter because Gideon doesn't know who they all are in the beginning either. So you're following along with Gideon as they try and figure out what the hell is going on. What the hell is going on is still kind of unknown at the end of this book. I have heard the next book, Harrow the Ninth, gets even weirder, and then Nona the Ninth is bizarre. So I'm actually really excited for that. So I said this is a sci-fi. It's kind of a really weird world where everything feels quite run down and gothic, but there are these technological elements to it, like we are on different planets that we've traveled to via spaceships. But the magic in this world is necromancy based, and all the necromancers are like completely geeking out upon this necromancer knowledge that they're gaining throughout this competition. And that part to me, especially like the competition and the obsession, really gave me Dark Academia vibes. So this is a really weird book. The way that it's written is weird. It's sometimes hard to know what's going on. But also, I ended up really loving all the characters and being really invested in the mystery of what's really going on. So I really love this. And if I am putting this up against The Egg by Andy Weir, it's just not probably a very fair competition because The Egg was so short. Still definitely worth a read, but Gideon the Ninth was like much more of a full extended experience and so different from so many other things that I've read. I'm actually looking at the next two battles, which are both fantasy battles, and realizing that in the month of November, I loved the sci-fi that I read, and the fantasy, not so much. So maybe I'm just in a sci-fi mood lately. Anyway, our first fantasy battle is going to be between Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse up against The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence. So firstly, Mirrored Heavens. This is the third and final book in the Between Earth and Sky trilogy that started with Black Sun. Like a lot of people, I really loved Black Sun. We're following a bunch of different characters who are representing to different degrees the different gods of this world. So this is inspired by like pre-Columbian American mythology. We have this sun priestess who is struggling to keep her position and has some kind of like prophecy of the future that we're working towards. We also have this young man whose mother believed that he was going to become like an avatar of the crow god and blinded him in order to achieve that. And then we also have this pirate ship. Was she a pirate ship? I want to say she was a pirate ship captain because she had the attitude of a pirate captain, and she has some kind of links to the sea goddess of this world. And we also have like some other people linked to the crow gods, the eagles, the winged serpents, or the golden eagles, the winged serpents, the jaguar. There's a jaguar guy. Anyway, the first book had a lot of momentum and the character interactions were really interesting and the characters themselves felt very unique. Unfortunately, the second book felt a lot like filler, and the third book, I felt like the characters had really lost that uniqueness that they had in the beginning. I also don't think that the book had a lot of momentum. A lot of the time we're kind of preparing for this upcoming war, which in the end was pretty anticlimactic. There were a few nice emotional parts at the end, but the plot wasn't there, and so for me, I don't know, it all kind of felt a bit stereotypical and predictable at the end. Like, the ending was a little bit too convenient, and I just never felt invested in that last book. I think the cast got too big, maybe, and maybe the plot got lost in that. I don't know, but in the end, I think I was a bit disappointed in that series, which is a shame because the cover of that final book was beautiful. So I really would have liked to love it so I could justify buying it at some point. But anyway, another beautiful book. Actually, maybe I should have called this the Beautiful Book Battle because The Book That Broke the World is a beautiful book cover. The inside though, I mean, I don't know. I actually feel a little bit conflicted about The Book That Broke the World because there are some elements to the story that I really love. Like, the concept is really great. We are following, well, more characters in The Book That Broke the World compared to the first book in the series. But initially we're following this young girl who lived out in the desert and had dreams of going to the city. When she gets there, she gets to explore the library. And our other main character is this guy who has lived his whole life in the library and isn't able to escape. Like, he's living with these other people that he considers his brothers and sisters, and they can't leave this particular room that they're trapped in the library. And of course our two main characters end up meeting up, and we learn a lot about this library and the concept of the library, and also the way that this book series is looking at like the rise and fall of civilizations and like the cycle of destruction and how we kind of bring it upon ourselves. I really like some of the ideas, and I'm frustrated that this series doesn't really seem to be digging into those ideas as much as I would like. The story is told a little bit non-linearly, which I can really like. Like, I really liked it in Ancillary Justice, although admittedly that was just 2 timelines. The Book That Broke the World is messing with time a little bit more than that. And there are definitely parts of the story where our characters have a very clear goal that they are working towards, and in those points I often feel engaged and invested in what's happening. And then there's other parts where I just don't know what the direction the story is going in. It's not exploring any interesting ideas, and I tend to get bored. So I want to love this series, and I'm still very hopeful for the 3rd book in the series, but also I just end up feeling like it's not meeting its potential either. So if I'm putting these 2 books up against each other, part of me just wants to pick it based on which book is the prettiest, but we shouldn't do that. I am definitely much more interested in The Book That Broke the World. Like, there are some really unique elements to that story that make me willing to overlook the fact that the overall plot and character development isn't doing it for me. Okay, our next battle is between a book I DNF'd and a book I should have DNF'd. Wish I could have DNF'd. So we have The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman up against The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. So firstly, The Bright Sword. So this is by Lev Grossman, who wrote the Magician's Trilogy. I have mixed feelings about the Magician's Trilogy, but I did really love the last book in that trilogy, and so I was really hopeful for The Bright Sword, which is Lev Grossman's like Arthur and Camelot retelling. Well, sort of. We're following kind of the crappiest knights of Camelot as they deal with kind of trying to continue on once Arthur is gone. So we start out with Colum, and he is just kind of faking it till he makes it. He's traveling to Camelot with the hopes of being a knight. And I think if we'd focused in maybe on just his story, it could have been better. But we also get the backstories of all these other knights. And I felt like with this book, like each time we would go to get the backstory of a different knight, just as I started thinking, oh, actually, this guy is kind of interesting, it would be like, okay, anyway, that's finished. Then it would go back to the current timeline where the knights are trying to work out what to do and are doing a terrible job of it. And again, it would be like, oh, now we've gone back to them not really doing much of anything. And then finally they would start doing something, and that would be the trigger to go back into another backstory of a character that I didn't care about. So it was like every time I almost got invested in this book, it was like, anyway, throw that all away, let's start something new. And I just got really tired, so I DNF'd it. I think maybe I got halfway, I've forgotten, but I just think it was kind of trying to be a grimdark retelling, and I almost want to recommend this for people who like the First Law trilogy, because in some ways it was similar feeling to that, but I just think it wasn't quite as good in terms of the humour, the writing style, or even the plot. Then The Lost Metal. So this is the 4th and final book in Mistborn Era 2. I really love, it's right here, the first era of Mistborn books, which is more of like a classic fantasy story with a lot of surprises along the way. The Lost Metal is kind of a Western fantasy, so it takes the same magic system, which involves people consuming metals to gain different magical powers, takes that same magic system and puts it into a Western setting. So now we have guns and technology, which obviously fits quite interestingly into this metal magic. And in the first book in the series, I thought I really liked the way that Brandon explored that use of the magic. However, I really didn't like any of the characters in this series, and by the end we're meant to be very deep into their emotional journey, which I didn't care about. The whole series, the ending of this book, it really hinges on you caring about one of the characters, Wayne, and I hate him. I hate him so much, so the ending fell very flat for me. And there's a lot of humour in this series that again just didn't appeal to my sense of humour. It felt very immature and stupid. So basically there were pages and pages in this book where I was just having a terrible time. I wasn't getting anything out of it. I skimmed some bits. I had to really push through to finish it. And if it hadn't been for the fact that this is a key piece in the bigger Cosmere, which I think actually still remains to be seen whether I think that's true or whether I could have got away with not reading this. But anyway, I read it. It actually makes me very concerned about the future of the Cosmere and whether it will continue to be to my taste, because if we get some more like some of the stuff that we got in The Lost Metal, it's gonna be a bad time for me. I did not like The Lost Metal at all. I can kind of see how some people might like it, but also not really. Anyway, I hated it, and so then when I try to battle it against The Bright Sword, it's a little bit difficult because I DNF'd The Bright Sword, right? But I actually think The Bright Sword is a better book than The Lost Metal, which I didn't DNF. But I would have DNF'd the book if I could have. I probably should have. So actually, I'm going to pick The Bright Sword as the winner of this battle. It doesn't seem right to be putting a book I DNF through to the next round, but I guess that's what we're doing. Okay, then my next battle is going to be between detective stories for a younger audience. So we have Death at Morning House by Maureen Johnson up against Detective Beans and The Case of the Missing Hat by Chen. So firstly, Death at Morning House. So this is by Maureen Johnson, who also writes the Truly Devious series, which I really love. It's a super fun detective story. And Death at Morning House has, in a lot of ways, very similar vibes. We're following a new character who, because of her disaster life and just general awkwardness, she's going to stay at this morning house where they're kind of running these tours, and there's a bunch of other teenagers also staying there and doing the same thing. What she discovers when she gets there is that there was both a historical murder at Morning House as well as a more recent murder, and so we're investigating both the murders in the past and the current murders and how they might be connected. So I want to say that this was a lot of fun. In a lot of ways it had that same tone that the Truly Devious books have. The problem I'm having with this book is the murder in the past. So we have a young 4-year-old boy who has been murdered, as well as a teenage girl, and the father of these children is really into eugenics. And I don't want to spoil this for you, but I feel like if you just put those facts together and think about it, you might be able to guess the direction some things go in. And what I really am struggling with this book, like more and more as I think about it, is this is a book for a younger audience. And so we're introducing the concept of eugenics without really giving much details about the problems with eugenics. There's a little bit of one of our characters in the past doubting their father's beliefs, and of course the more modern future teens are all like, "Ooh, eugenics, that's a disaster," but it doesn't really tell you anything about like why it's so bad. And I just would worry about introducing that idea to young people without really giving them any further information. So like from an actual reading the story perspective, I had a fun time with it, but the more and more I think about it, I'm like, I don't know if I'd recommend this book to a teenager, not without a bigger conversation. So that's that. A much more fun read I do have physically, because I got it from the library, and that is Detective Beans. And this is just super cute and wholesome. We're following this young cat boy who calls himself Detective Beans, and right at the beginning his detective hat goes missing, and he ends up going on kind of like this really big long journey trying to find his detective hat, because different people keep being like, "Oh yeah, we had that, but we gave it to somebody else," or "this happened to it." So he goes and just keeps looking for it. And there's parts where it's very ridiculous, it's super cute, it's just so wholesome the whole time. I laughed, it made me happy. Is it anything serious? Definitely not, but I had a great time with this. So if you want something cute and fun, this is it. And of course, it's a pretty quick read as well. So if I'm putting Death at Morning House up against Detective Beans is going to be winning. Then lastly, I read a couple of graphic novels. So we have Middlewest by Skottie Young and George Corona up against Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama. So firstly, Middlewest. The edition I got from the library digitally was the complete series wrapped up into one volume, but I did not actually get to the end of the series, and I've returned it now, so I don't know how far through I got, but not that far. I think maybe one volume, maybe two, or like normal graphic novel volume length. This is following this young boy whose father is very abusive, and it's represented as his father kind of turning into this storm. So at one point his father turns into a storm, and he then goes on the run, ends up meeting up with this circus and kind of following along with them. And he kind of also has a problem with perhaps having a storm inside him. So really, like, it's just representing this abuse through this storm metaphor. And I really liked the art. I thought it was quite beautiful. I liked the idea of the story, but I was just really bored. And at one point I put it down and then I just didn't pick it up again because I didn't feel that interested in what was happening. And I kind of felt like the direction the story was going in was trying to have him and his father like come to some kind of resolution. And I wasn't really interested in that direction either. So really this is another one that I DNF'd. Then we have Witch Hat Atelier. So this is a really cute manga series that a lot of people have been really loving lately. We're following this young girl who really wants to be a witch and use the kind of magic they have, but supposedly you have to be born as a witch to be able to do magic. Perhaps that isn't entirely true, and she ends up, through kind of tragic events, being able to learn something about this magic. So it's super cute. She goes on a bit of a magical journey in the middle of it and meets a bunch of other trainee witches who I expect will play a big part as the story continues. And I do really like the way that the magic works in this story. Especially I think it's going to work very well for the graphical format. I can feel myself saying a but, and my only but is that, like, I liked it. It was a lot of fun. It was cute. But that was it. I'm expecting from everything I've heard that the series does go further and do more interesting things. But again, I just haven't felt the motivation to pick up the second volume. Probably though that's more indicative of my mental state at the moment rather than the quality of the series. So hopefully I will get to volume 2 at some point soon. Anyway, if I am putting these two up against each other, I am going to pick Witch Hat Atelier because it was super cute and it does have some really interesting ideas in there that I'm looking forward to the rest of the series digging into it. I think what I'm afraid of is that so many manga series that I've started have then kind of petered off and ended up really disappointing me. So I'm a little bit hesitant to like get into this big series that I have high hopes for and then not having it deliver. But anyway, Witch Hat Atelier through to the next round, which means we will now do a couple of semi-final rounds. Firstly, let's do our sci-fi semi-final battle. I have both the books here. So we have Ancillary Justice up against Gideon the Ninth. I feel like this is going to be the hardest battle of the video because I loved both of these. But I was definitely more confused for Gideon the Ninth. Is that true? I was actually sometimes confused in Ancillary Justice just because sometimes I felt like it was a little bit too clever for me. And I really felt like I needed to have my brain switched on to follow what was happening in Ancillary Justice. However, that is actually also true for Gideon the Ninth. But in Gideon the Ninth, it was more just because there was a lack of clarity about what was going on, and that was kind of the point of it. And also there was just so many characters for me to keep track of. But I was very satisfied with the ending of Gideon the Ninth, but I actually think it really doesn't compare to how the ending of Ancillary Justice made me feel. And there were so many parts of Ancillary Justice where just the concepts that were being introduced were like mind-blowing to me, and so many intense action scenes and characters that I grew to really love, even though they were kind of such strange characters. So even though I loved Gideon the Ninth, I think actually we're going to pick Ancillary Justice as the best sci-fi of the month. Then we'll pick the best fantasy book. So we have The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence up against The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. And I think just because I DNF The Bright Sword, probably we have to pick The Book That Broke the World. Then let's have a graphic novel battle. So we will have Detective Beans and The Case of the Missing Hat up against Witch Hat Atelier Volume 1. And I'm definitely going to pick Detective Beans because it was just so cute. Like, if we're just competing on cuteness, Detective Beans wins. But also it wins on humor and wholesomeness and engagement. Like, it definitely is the winner. I'm a bit concerned now that Detective Beans is going to be my best book of the month, but probably not, probably not. So we'll do a final battle. For best book of the month, we have Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie up against The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence, up against Detective Beans and The Case of the Missing Hat. So, firstly, we are going to take away The Book That Broke the World, even though so many great concepts in there. The actual story just doesn't come across as well as I would have hoped it would. And it just, like, I feel like that book series has so much potential and it doesn't deliver. And if I compare that to Ancillary Justice, which also has so much potential, but delivers on it. Like, the characters, the plot, the ideas, so great. So then it's Ancillary Justice up against Detective Beans. And even though I really love Detective Beans, let's admit that it wasn't a mental challenge in any way, whereas this I really thought made me think, and I loved it. So Ancillary Justice is the best book of the month. I'm honestly not surprised. I love this so much. And I can't wait to read the third book in the series. Anyway, that is all the books that I read in November. If you have read any of these books, I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments, or let me know what the best book you read in November was. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.